For the past 6 months, in the Indian electric two-wheeler market, TVS has been consistently at the number one position. And so far, most of that success can be accounted to the popular iQube electric scooter range. Of course, the TVS X, the flagship sporty electric scooter, is also on sale, but most of the volumes come from the iQube. Now, the company has also revealed this, the Orbiter. It was launched just some weeks ago and it has a starting price of just about 1 lakh rupees. We've been given a brief opportunity to sample TVS's latest electric creation, and we're going to tell you what exactly it is. With the iQube, TVS wanted its debut electric scooter to look as innocuous as possible, but with EVs now becoming increasingly commonplace, the company went down a bolder design direction with the Orbiter. This unusual looking EV has mostly boxy styling, with a few curves and edges sprinkled in here and there. While this design will probably not find universal appeal unlike the iQube, it does stand out of the crowd, especially in one of the brighter color options. Despite its relatively affordable price tag, the Orbiter is a well-finished product with good quality plastics used for the bodywork and no panel gaps or rough edges in sight or touch. It's a typical TVS affair. And while the Orbiter is the most affordable electric scooter in TVS's portfolio, there's no signs today that we've come across that it feels built down to a cost or particularly cheap. For instance, these pillion foot peg handles click nicely into place. All of the switchgear is nice and tactile. You don't feel any hard or sharp edges. There's no unseemly panel gaps on the scooter. And overall, the sense of quality that you expect from TVS has carried over, even though this is a more budget-oriented offering. The Orbiter packs in a few nifty features that even the more expensive iQube lineup doesn't get. For instance, you've got cruise control, hill-hold control, and a 14-inch front wheel. In our time today, all of those features have worked reasonably well, although only a real-world test will paint a proper picture of how the Orbiter reacts to the chaotic Indian road environment. The Orbiter also gets a couple of smart features like every other electric scooter if you pair your phone to the LCD display via TVS's app. However, in our limited time with it, we haven't been able to sample any of these, and a real-world test will paint a proper picture of how these function. For instance, the hill-hold control, you simply come to a stop. It's very seamless taking off. There's no herky-jerkiness. The throttle is very smooth. It's very predictable. Then you've got cruise control. It's a simple two-step process. You just press this button, cruise control is on, and then you press it to set the speed, and then you forget about it. It only works at speeds above 20 kph, so that is something to keep in mind. And coming to the 14-inch front wheel, TVS says that was a decision taken to combat our notoriously bumpy roads. A 14-inch front wheel gives you that added layer of stability when you're navigating speed breakers, potholes, and anything else that you will encounter out on our roads. The overarching first impression that I get from this thing is that it's going to be a relaxed and comfortable commuting companion. That's essentially what this thing was created to do, so that's not a bad thing. And we'll start with how you sit on the scooter because that shapes a large part of your riding experience. To show you what an average sized human being looks like on the Orbiter, I'm going to call Autocar India's famous Ardeshir Baxter. He's about 5'6", 5'7". That's about the average Indian height. And as you can see, he's pretty comfortable. Even though the Orbiter is a large-ish scooter, he's not really on his tiptoes or anything like that. Thank you, Ashley. And even for somebody of my height, I'm about 5'11", closer to 6 with my riding gear and everything. And even when I'm making lock-to-lock turns, there's a nice amount of space both on the seat as well as with the handlebar. The handlebar doesn't foul with my knees while going from lock to lock. That's a good thing. It's a nice and upright handlebar. And very unusually, this is a pretty wide handlebar for a scooter. Most scooters are pretty like this. This one, you feel a little bit like a motorcycle. So the overall riding triangle, I think it's very well sorted for riders of all shapes and sizes. The Orbiter's riding experience is rather similar to the iQube in that both of them are calm, relaxed EVs with no real frills in sort of the riding experience that they provide. The Orbiter, TVS claims, uses a brand new frame. It's very unrelated to the iQube, except for the fact that both of them use underbone frames. The suspension units, however, are shared between both of them. However, the Orbiter gets different spring and damping rates because to account for the larger front wheel, they've softened up the suspension just a little bit. Even the rear feels a little softer. However, we'll have to verify that after a proper real-world test. And just like the iQube, the Orbiter also uses a hub-mounted motor. This hub-mounted motor isn't a very powerful thing. It's only got 2.5 kilowatts of peak power. and it's not sourced from Bosch, it's an Indian supplier. TVS hasn't informed us who that is, but in any case, it works just as well as the one on the iQube. It's only got a 68 kph top speed as a consequence of that lower power output, but on the upshot you have more range, and to be honest, it's not like the acceleration feels very lethargic. Even in eco mode you can get up to 40-45 kph without any stress, and city mode will take you all the way to 68 kph, the indicated top speed, without too much fuss. At 112 kilos, the Orbiter is lighter than the iQube with a similarly sized 3.1 kWh battery, and despite its 14-inch front wheel, it feels pleasantly flickable, very similar to a conventional scooter in that regard. This, I think, will be a good thing for someone who's looking to buy their first EV. Now you've probably already gathered that the Orbiter isn't a very sporty or sharp thing. It's a very soft, composed commuting partner. The suspension really does have a bit of wallow if you turn up the pace and just try to flick it in. So it's best to reserve that sort of behavior to other vehicles. But in the sort of context of what people will use the Orbiter for, it seems to me that TVS has really struck that middle ground very well. It's not overly soft and wallowy like some of the cheap electric scooters that are out on the market, and it's not overly stiff as something like an Ather 450. The suspension balance is really very similar to that of an iQube. It's a plush, absorptive setup, but it doesn't feel overly underdamped or anything. And speaking of probably the most burning question that is on everyone's mind, what is the range? Now, this is an electric two-wheeler. This is the most affordable electric two-wheeler from TVS, but interestingly, it isn't having the smallest battery pack. The Orbiter has a 3.1 kWh battery pack with a claimed IDC range of about 158 kilometers. Now, we haven't been able to put that claim to the test. That will have to wait for a later date. But what I can tell you is that a 100% charged TVS Orbiter screen, it showed me about 115 kilometers on the range computer. Now, speaking from my previous experience with the iQube, the range computer on TVS two-wheelers is really accurate. What you see is what you get. I expect that sort of behavior to continue on the Orbiter, but that is something we will confirm at a later date. And just to give you a rundown of all the practical convenience enhancing features that TVS has baked into the Orbiter, you've got a nice spacious cubby over here. It's open, there's no enclosed compartment or anything, but it comfortably fits my smartphone. It's a pretty big one. This is about a 6-inch screen smartphone, and it comfortably fits it. I think another one of the same size can also fit in. You've got a USB port right over here, and interestingly, the charging port, where on the iQube it's over here, on the Orbiter it's over here, is the same sort of charger. It's a 650 watt charger. It's pretty quick. It tops up the battery to 80% from zero in about 4 hours and 10 minutes, says the company. You've also got a pretty big boot. It's about 34 liters. That's bigger even than the top iQube, which is about 32 liters. Let me show that to you. And as you can see, there are two half-face helmets. Now, what I've always known from TVS, while their boots are quite large and they have a nice decent volume baked in, they are never really very deep. So even fitting a Indian full face helmet, I think it'll be a bit of a struggle. Nevertheless, it's very nice to see a large boot. This is just a small nit that I have to pick over here. And speaking of nitpicking, that's pretty much what I can do about the Orbiter. There's really not much to complain about today, but I would have liked to see a front disc brake. There's really nothing wrong with the drum brake. There's adequate power, but just like every other drum brake setup, there's not really enough feel. And that's about all I have to share with you today regarding the TVS Orbiter. And as TVS's entry-level EV offering, it really doesn't feel entry-level in some areas. There's really some advantages that it has over the iQube in terms of space and range. Even in comparison to the 3.1 iQube, I think this has more range. So there are some certain inherent strong points that the Orbiter does have. However, I don't think that this test track environment is the best fit for the Orbiter. We really need to ride this in the real world, see how comfortable it is, see what the range claims are, and then paint an accurate picture. And there's also the question of why would somebody pick the Orbiter over the iQube lineup. There are the iQube 2.2 and the iQube 3.1. They're priced about on par with the Orbiter. So there is also that question of where the TVS Orbiter fits into the lineup. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.